Welcome to the Pewter Museum, my show dedicated to looking at the mysteries, controversies, and unsolved questions in the Pokémon series. My name's Brandon, and today I'll be looking at the mystery of who the other Pallet Town trainers were in the Pokémon anime. Before we truly start, I just want to make it clear that this entire video is theoretical. There is no actual answer to this mystery, and there probably never will be. However, it's a bit of fun to look for some clues and potential evidence and try to piece together something that can become headcanon. For those that are uninformed, Ketchum begins his Pokémon journey in Pallet Town. Beginning trainers can come to Pallet and receive a starter Pokémon from Professor Oak, and as far as we know, 3 other rookie trainers showed up the same day Ash did. The one trainer we actually know about is Gary Oak. This leaves 2 mystery trainers that we never see with our own eyes. We know that they exist in the world of the show, otherwise Ash wouldn't have missed out on a starter Pokémon and began his journey with Pikachu. These trainers are referenced numerous times throughout the show, and their journeys are actually given a conclusion without being shown on screen for a single second. I think a good place to start with this mystery is laying out everything we know about the trainers and looking at every single mention of them. Doing this gives us a good framework and set of parameters for when we look at some potential candidates later on. The first mention of these trainers is in the debut episode Pokémon I Choose You. Here we learn that alongside Gary, 2 other trainers arrived on time and received a starter Pokémon. We don't learn this initially, but we know that they picked Bulbasaur and Charmander.
Because my Pokémon will be Charmander! Ah!
The early bird gets the worm, or in this case, the Pokémon.
Does that mean all the Pokémon are gone?
Well, there is still one left, but
Professor, I'll take it!
During Johto's Silver Conference, Ash has his first proper battle with Gary, and we see that he owns a Blastoise, letting us know that he picked Squirtle way back in the beginning. The next mention of the mystery Pallet Town trainers comes in the very next episode, Pokémon Emergency. Ash arrives at the Viridian City Pokémon Center and calls Professor Oak, who informs him that all the other trainers made it there safely and that he's pleased Ash made it too.
I suppose that proves it. The other new Pokémon trainers made it there with no problem, and I'm pleasantly surprised you got there so soon.
2 episodes later, these mystery trainers are mentioned yet again. In Challenge of the Samurai, Samurai mentions he is battling all of the new trainers from Pallet and that they've all beaten him so far. Here we get confirmation that the other trainers possess a Bulbasaur and Charmander, as we get a quick flashback that shows still images of those 2 Pokémon battling Samurai. 3 episodes later, the trainers receive another mention. In the Waterflowers of Cerulean City, we get our first major news about them. Misty's sisters mention they've recently battled and lost to 3 trainers from Pallet Town. Because of this, they offer to just give Ash the badge because their Pokemon are tired and they're probably just going to lose again. This is an important nugget of information, as we get concrete evidence that they have earned at least 1 gym badge, and presumably they beat Brock too, although he never mentions anything. Out of the first 7 episodes of the show, 4 have mentioned these other trainers. With the way the show was being written at this point, it really feels like there was supposed to be a payoff to all of this. However, the next mention, as far as I know, isn't until Primeape Goes Bananas, which is almost 20 episodes later. Here Ash calls Professor Oak, and Oak makes note that while Ash has 4 gym badges, the other trainers have 5 already and have made it to Celadon City.
only 4 badges?
Ash, are you still there? I just found out this morning that all your other rivals have earned 5 badges each, including Gary. They've all passed through Celadon City too.
Again, this is important info, as not only do we have concrete evidence of these trainers earning 5 badges, but it tells us that these trainers are skilled. Keep that in mind, folks. We wouldn't hear a single peep about these trainers for almost a year. 40 episodes go by until Ash returns to Pallet Town in Showdown at the Poké Corral. Here Oak mentions that 4 trainers left Pallet Town at the same time, but Gary and Ash were the ones to earn the most badges. Ash actually asks Oak what happened here, and he replies that, while they did get off to a great start, they ultimately didn't have the skill.
Ash, 4 Pokémon trainers left Pallet Town on their Pokémon journeys. But you and Gary have earned the most badges, and I'm very proud.
Oh, what happened to the other 2?
They both got off to an excellent start, but they just didn't have the skill.
Oh, that's too bad.
They just wimped out.
And that's it. These trainers are never mentioned again, and Ash asking about them is supposed to be a final acknowledgement to the audience. So let's put together what we definitively know about these trainers. These 2 leave Pallet Town and make it to Viridian City with ease. They then soundly defeat Samurai, eventually reach Cerulean City and win a gym badge, before collecting a total of 5 just before Ash reaches Celadon City. We know for sure they both reached Celadon City, but we get radio silence until finding out they didn't earn 8 badges, and they apparently didn't have enough skill. At this point, the biggest question I have is, what do you mean they didn't have enough skill? They were skilled enough to win 5 badges minimum and at a quicker pace than Ash, yet they weren't skilled enough? From a writing standpoint, this has never made much sense to me. These trainers are constantly mentioned as being ahead and better than Ash, yet to handwave them out of the show, the writers say they weren't skilled enough. It's just extremely lazy writing. The only way I can kinda see this holding up is if they challenged Viridian Gym during the time Giovanni was using Mewtwo. Theoretically, they could have challenged him, been absolutely destroyed and beaten so badly that they threw in the towel. Considering Gary challenges Giovanni while he has Mewtwo, it would make sense that they also arrived and challenged him at a similar time. None of this is confirmed, but I think I'll be using it as my headcanon for the time being, as the lazy, they weren't skilled enough explanation is not even remotely a satisfying conclusion. Next up in our attempts to try and solve this mystery is to look at every single appearance of a Pokemon in the Bulbasaur and Charmander lines and see if any of those Pokemon could have come from Oak, or if any of the trainers could possibly be from Pallet. Firstly, I want to discredit some very popular theories. Right off the bat, I want to tell you that no, Red is not one of these trainers and neither is Green/Leaf. Red does not exist in this universe and he's certainly not unskilled and someone who would fail on their journey. If he did fail, he really wouldn't be the Red that we know. Another popular theory I see thrown around is that Corey, one of the trainers from Mewtwo Strikes Back, is the Bulbasaur trainer. While this would be kinda neat, the fact that Mewtwo invited the best trainers in the world sorta discredits this one. Considering the two mystery trainers failed on their journey, you would imagine they wouldn't get an invite to New Island, especially because the events of this movie quite literally take place directly after Oak calls them unskilled. They couldn't receive an invite before it's confirmed they failed either, because Mewtwo literally breaks free from Giovanni in the same episode Oak makes the last mention of those trainers. The timeline just doesn't work. Also in that movie is Nisha, who owns a Blastoise. This could have been a slightly valid theory at the time, but since we found out Gary picked Squirtle, this disqualifies her too, along with all the other things I mentioned for Corey. Another extremely baseless theory is that the mystery female that appears in the first opening is one of the trainers. No, just no. This is more wishful thinking, and if you do a tiny bit of research, it doesn't hold up. Not only would it be incredibly random to feature one of the mystery trainers in the opening, but the Japanese intro confirms she's just some random girl. You see, in the Japanese intro, the lyrics have a section where it talks about catching Pokemon anywhere, which says, "In fire, in water, in grass, in forests, in earth, in clouds, in that girl's skirt." This line plays right as Pikachu runs through this girl's legs. This basically goes to show us that the girl exists purely for the joke in the lyrics. There was no higher purpose for her at all. Another easy to disprove theory is that Richie is one of the trainers. He's an obvious candidate because he owns a Charmander. However, we know the trainers never make it to the Pokemon League, and even if they did, Professor Oak is in the crowd and definitely would have recognised him and mentioned something. Heck, Richie would have mentioned it to Ash. The final of my random and not very plausible theories is Asunta. This isn't a very popular one, which I'm surprised by because it's basically the same as Richie. After Richie defeats Ash at the Indigo Plateau, he moves on to the next round and faces Asunta. They both come down to their final Pokemon, with Asunta getting the win via her Ivysaur. For the exact same reasons I disqualified Richie, I also have to disqualify her. However, I'm surprised she isn't brought up in theories more. With all of those candidates easily disproved, I'm left with two actual choices that we know about and could have some shred of credibility to being the mystery trainers. The least likely of the two is the Bulbasaur that Ash catches in Bulbasaur in the Hidden Village. Now, when I say less likely, I really mean there is zero chance that this is correct, but on first glance it can seem convincing. While it's not a Pallet Town trainer, the Bulbasaur here is without a trainer and is incredibly distrusting of humans. Melanie's village in this episode is specifically stated to be for injured or abandoned Pokemon. While this Bulbasaur could have been injured in the past, its intense distrust for trainers suggests it was abandoned. When putting together this information with Oak's not skilled enough comment, it seems like this could be the Bulbasaur from Pallet Town. Perhaps they encountered a similar situation that Ash experiences with Pikachu and Charizard. Maybe Bulbasaur was difficult to control, and ultimately they decided it was better to release it. We also see in the episode Bulbasaur the Ambassador that Bulbasaur is picked to act as a mediator for the quarrelling Pokemon at Oak's lab. You could definitely infer from this that Bulbasaur is the prime candidate and able to do so well in this situation because it had already lived at Oak's lab previously. This would be such a neat thing if it turned out to be true, but it isn't. The fact that Oak never mentions Bulbasaur previously belonging to him and living at the lab is a major strike against it. The second major strike is that the timelines don't add up. If this Bulbasaur was abandoned by a Pallet Town trainer, that means they abandoned it before the third gym. The only way this theory works is if the trainer was similar to Damien, in that they abandoned it for being weak or some other reason, and then just continued on their journey, or if they somehow abandoned it for the right reasons, yet still continued on their journey. I guess the theory could work if you believed in this, but considering there are a number of other things going against it, I can't declare Bulbasaur one of Oak's starter Pokemon. It would have made for some cool story moments if it was real though, similar to Ash with Paul's Charmander. Speaking of trainers who treat fire-type Pokemon poorly, Damien is the top suspect for being one of the mystery Pallet Town trainers. Here's what we know about him from the single episode he appears in. In Charmander the Stray Pokemon, Ash and Co encounter a Charmander sitting on a rock. Ash attempts to catch it, but they find out he can't because it belongs to a trainer. Eventually they come to a Pokemon Center and hear a trainer bragging about abandoning a Charmander.
You're the man, Damien.
Yo, I thought you had a Charmander too.
Yeah, I had one, but that puny thing was so weak it couldn't even beat the weakest opponents.
Ash saves Charmander from a storm and brings it to the Pokemon Center. Damien tries to get it back, but Charmander rejects Damien and goes with Ash. After this, we never see Damien again. Damien fits the bill of being a Pallet Town trainer in a number of ways. Obviously he owns a Charmander, which makes him a suspect automatically. We can also deduce that while his training methods are despicable, he seems to be pretty strong. There's no doubt he would have steamrolled Samurai in the Viridian Forest. As we see here, Damien is quite literally a little bit ahead too, which would add up with these mystery trainers always being a step ahead of Ash. You might be asking, if Damien is the trainer, why doesn't Misty recognise him? Well, as you'll recall, Damien would have faced Misty's sisters, not Misty herself. It also makes sense that Pallet Town, Professor Oak, and anything that would make Ash and Damien recognisable to each other isn't brought up. The two only really interact based on the welfare and ownership of Charmander. There isn't exactly any time for them to exchange background info in the episode. Correct me if I'm wrong, but Ash doesn't give out any identifying information other than his name, so it's not weird that they wouldn't recognise they're both Pallet Town trainers. The biggest and possibly the only sticking point of the Damien is from Pallet Town theory is that Brock doesn't recognise him. Brock was the sole operator of the Pewter City gym up until joining Ash, so if Damien went there and won the badge, he would have faced Brock, and it would make no sense that Brock doesn't recognise him here. However, using the anime's in-universe logic, we can find a way around this. In the Battle of the Badge, Gary Oak shows off his badge collection, revealing he has 10 gym badges. Of these badges, the only ones that are recognisable are the Boulder Badge, Cascade Badge, and Rainbow Badge. The rest are unique designs never seen before. This implies he didn't defeat Lieutenant Surge, Sabrina, and Koga, and we're outright told at one point that he didn't beat Blaine as he had no idea there was a gym on Cinnabar Island. Additionally, in Showdown at Dark City, two rival unofficial Pokemon gyms are fighting with each other to try and become officially certified. If we take Gary's badges at face value rather than being an error, it means there are more than 8 gyms in Kanto, and it's just a requirement to beat any of the 8 to enter the Pokemon League. This image of Gary has become a meme, but it's actually given legitimacy thanks to the Unova arc where there are clearly more than 8 gyms. Ash encounters 11 official gyms, and because that makes the more than 8 gym rule canon, we kinda have to believe that there could be more than 8 in Kanto too. Because of this, it wouldn't be impossible for Damien to arrive in Pewter City, realise he is mismatched against Brock, and decide to battle another gym or build up his team a bit more. He even could have returned to the gym once Brock had left and his family had taken over. So, we know Damien basically matches up with everything so far. That just leaves the "they weren't skilled enough" comment from Professor Oak. And honestly, I can see it fitting here. If Damien continued his horrible ways of treating Pokemon and didn't develop, it wouldn't surprise me that he eventually got to a point where he couldn't progress further. Damien strikes me as the type who would throw in the towel at the first sign of a challenge, so it wouldn't surprise me if he gave up after losing a gym battle. Of all the actual characters that could potentially be one of the Pallet Town trainers, Damien is the only one who remotely fits the bill. Damien seems like a very early prototype version of Paul, so it wouldn't surprise me to hear that they took this character and adapted it into an actual recurring rival in Sinnoh. While Damien is the last of the actual characters who could realistically be one of the Pallet Town trainers, I've decided to look at every example of a Bulbasaur or Charmander line Pokemon appearing in the show. None of these would even remotely be correct, but it's fun to speculate. The first time we see one of the starters in a non-featured role is during Battle aboard the St. Anne. The St. Anne is basically a massive Pokemon convention, which means we get a couple of shots here. The first is of 2 young boys talking about their Charmander on the boat. Both of these trainers could fit the age bracket of a new trainer who started at the same time as Ash. Could one of these kids on the boat potentially have been the Charmander trainer? Later on in the episode, we also see a bunch of Bulbasaur come together and attack Team Rocket. While we don't actually see the trainers associated with these Pokemon, one of these could potentially belong to the Pallet Town trainer. The next time we see one of the starters is during Hypno's nap time. We see a Charmander at the Pokemon Center who has been affected by the episode's events. Again, we don't actually see its trainer, but this Charmander could realistically belong to someone from Pallet. In the very next episode, we also get a glimpse of a Charmander. In Pokemon Fashion Flash, we see a male trainer on the street with his Charmander. The next example is probably the worst of them all. During March of the Executor Squad, in what is quite literally a blink and you'll miss it moment, we see a Venusaur briefly in a shot of a crowd. Trying to spot where it was in this episode made me feel like some conspiracy theorist analysing every pixel of the Zapruder film. Ash evolves his Charmander to Charmeleon in this episode, so would it be too soon for the other Pallet Town trainer to evolve their Bulbasaur all the way to a Venusaur? Similar to Charmander's appearance in Hypno's nap time, we also see an Ivysaur in the hospital for a Chansey operation. Just like the previous example, no trainer is shown with the Ivysaur here. Our final encounter with one of the starter Pokemon before Oak confirms that the trainers gave up is in the Breeding Center Secret. This time the Charmander shown is actually accompanied by a trainer, as they unknowingly hand over their Pokemon to Butch and Cassidy. This would be cutting it very close to Oak saying they gave up on their journey. Perhaps this audio was part of the reason that they gave up on their dreams of being a Pokemon master? In reality, none of these examples are the mystery Pallet Town trainers. However, it is fun to speculate about this rarely discussed subject. At the end of the day, these occasionally mentioned characters only served as a plot device that would result in Ash being partnered with Pikachu. I highly doubt there was ever actually any grand plans to introduce them into the show. If there were grand plans, they probably came from Takeshi Shudo, and like basically every idea Shudo had for Pokemon, it was shot down. Having said that, if the writers weren't planning on doing anything with them, I think it would have been better to never mention them again. Periodically bringing up how their journeys are going in comparison to Ash just conditions viewers to believe they'll show up at some point and play some sort of role in the show. I think the writers wanted to emphasise how far behind Ash was, but they didn't need these imaginary Pallet Town trainers to do that. They did an effective job at showing this just with Gary. Every time Ash encountered Gary, we'd see examples of ways that he was out in front, and almost every time Ash called Professor Oak, we'd get to see how much better Gary was doing. By bringing up the trainers again and again, we ended up with a situation similar to the GS Ball, where fans were expecting a payoff while the writers were hoping everybody would forget it. If there's one thing we can take away from this, it's that fans always remember. Thanks for tuning into another unexplained mystery from the Pewter Museum. I hope you enjoyed the video. I tried to be as thorough as possible in my research and left no stone unturned to see if we could find some sort of concrete evidence. Having seen all of the information now, who do you guys think could be the Bulbasaur and Charmander trainers? Let me know in the comments below.